Hey, you caught me here at the Board Game Network. I'm going to show you how to play this game called Black Orchestra. It plays 1 to 5 players in an hour to an hour and a half. It's put out by Game Salute, and I've got it set up here for a couple of players. You just put these tiles mix them up, put them face down, and you put them on every black square on the board. And you'll notice that some of the circles are lighter and some are darker. So all of the black circles have those squares on them, but they're kind of hard to see. So you also put Hitler and his deputies around the board, and you look at the icon right there on the tile, and then you look for the circle that has that icon, and that's where they start on the board. Your goal in this game is to assassinate Hitler. And it's a cooperative game, so you and whoever else is playing are trying to accomplish that. And so if you can assassinate Hitler, then you win the game. Everybody takes a color. They take one of the people, and everybody has their own special ability. And you've got 2 cubes of that color with a pawn of that color, and all people's pawns start in the train station. Their cube starts on timid here and a medium suspicion there. Here's the play order right here, and so it's laid out really nicely on the board so you can follow it. So the very first thing you do is check for Hitler. So you're going to mix up these conspirator deck cards and lay them there. The interrogation deck cards are going to be there. These cards are going to be separated by number 1 through 7 and then mixed up. And then you're going to remove 2 of each card. So you don't necessarily know every card in the deck. Here's your dice that you get to roll. Hitler, military support starts on a 3. That's for the standard game. You can play it easier or harder. If you have an easier game, you start down on 2. A harder game, you start up on 4. And you also have these tiles, standard, medium, and hard, to cover, so you never go below wherever you're covering. So you start the easy down here, the medium, and the hard up there. So the first step is checking for Hitler and deputy penalties. If you ever start at the beginning of the player turn with you in the same space as Hitler or one of his deputies, you do whatever it says on the deputy or Hitler. So this says discard a card, so you'd have to discard a card out of your hand. +1 suspicion, so you have to move up 1 on your suspicion track for anybody that's in that space. So these are all bad. That's Hitler and deputy penalties, and these move around based on these cards up here. Hitler and the deputies move around, so even though you may not be in the space with them, by your next turn you may be in the space with some of them because they've moved around. Take up to 3 actions. Here's all the different choices for actions. The first one is conspire. You can roll a die for each action you want to take, so you can roll up to 3 die and use all 3 actions. You only get to do this once. All of these other actions you can do as many times as you want, up to 3 in any order you want. But once you've done a conspire, you can't do it again. So you can't roll 1 die and then not like it and roll 1 die and then roll 1 die. You have to roll only 1 time. And the way you interpret these results is a target, which is on 2 of the 6 faces, goes up here on the descent track. Once you fill the descent track, so you've got 3 targets, then you get to do the advantage here on this conspire. So if you roll more than that, let's say there's maybe already 2 up there, and you roll 3 dice and you get 2 more targets, you're going to put 1 up there, use the ability, and your leftover one's going to start your next one, so you don't lose it. But here's the 2 abilities. One is to move your conspirator up 1 motivation. So you have to be up here at committed or zealous to try to assassinate Hitler. And some of the plots make you be at zealous. So being up here is good, and being down on suspicion is good. So that allows you to move up any conspirator, so it doesn't matter whose turn it is. Choose a conspirator to go up one. And then the other thing you can do is move Hitler's military support down by one. And Hitler's support down is good. So up is bad, down is good. So that is conspire. For each one of the eagles rolled, you raise your suspicion by one. So that's not good. So you can actually do this and end up with some bad results from it. You place your targets up there, and the numbers, is a 1, a 2, and a 3 on this die. 2 targets and an eagle. If any of them that show up as numbers, you get that many more actions. So if you use all 3 of your die, I would get 1 extra action because of that die roll. Move an adjacent space. So you look at the dotted line, you just go from one space to the next adjacent space. You'll notice some of these spaces have numbers, or they all have numbers. That means you can only be in there on those steps. So you're starting out with the first step, so you can only be on those that start with a 1. To be able to move into a 2, you have to be pulling event cards from step 2 or greater to go into 2, and likewise. You'll notice some of these say not 7. So once you get up here, that limits some of these you can't move into. So that's moving. And the train station, all of Berlin is considered to be adjacent. So going from a train station, you can go from the train station to the Chancellery, to the Gestapo headquarters over here, down here. These are all adjacent, and to exit out of Berlin you have to go back to the train station, and then you follow the dotted lines. Draw a card. So that lets you draw a card from the conspirator deck. And you have a hand size limit of 2 cards to start with when you're timid. You'll notice when you go up, your hand size goes up also. When you go up to positive, that's when you have some kind of special ability that you can begin using. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, as an action, increase the motivation of all other conspirators in your space by 1, limit once per turn. So that you use that as an action. And you could be in the same space with some other people, and everybody goes up on their motivation. Eric Court says, as an action, look at the top 3 event cards of the current stage and replace them in any order. So you get to look at these, what I called steps or stages. You look at the top 3, put them back in any order you want, and then you kind of know what's coming. But that doesn't happen until you got positive motivation. Committed says you can use plot cards now, which are in here. And zealous means you can use reckless plot cards. There's ones that say reckless, which means you have to be zealous. So that is playing a card or enacting a plot. Well, that was drawing a card, and then you can play a card. Once you have cards in your hand, you can use the card for whatever it tells you can use it for. You'll notice some of these cards say they are restricted. They've got this red diamond down here. And plot cards also count as restricted cards. You can share a card or a tile. That's these tiles here, or a card in your hand. All you got to be in the same space as somebody else, and you can either take or give back and forth as much as you want. This is share 1 card or 1 tile for 1 action. You can search your location. Searching your location means you flip a tile face up. It shows you what is in it. So this is intel. And the purpose of these tiles is they help you fulfill your plots. Your plots give you different things that you have to have in your hand to try to attempt to do the assassination. There's required elements and there's optional elements. So once you've searched your location, so you flipped it face up, then you can procure resources, which means take it and put it as an item on your sheet here. And you only have room for 3 unless you're playing a 1 or 2 player game, and then you have room for 4. You then deliver an item, and delivering an item means taking an item and discarding it at a certain space. Now these spaces, you can look at these spaces, they're not necessarily covered up, but this one says -2 suspicion, you only for explosives. So if you have explosives in your items here, you can move over here, you can discard your explosives, and then you get to move down 2 on the suspicion track. So these black squares all have some kind of positive ability that help you. Use a special ability if motivation is positive or higher. So that's your special ability here that's written on your card. You can release a conspirator from jail. So if somebody is in jail, that is from a Gestapo raid, they get put in prison. The other player has to be in the Gestapo headquarters. They have to take this action. They cannot be at extreme suspicion on their chart. They roll 1 die, and on a result of an eagle, they are arrested. Otherwise, you raise your suspicion by 1, and the person who's released from jail comes out of jail, and they're at extreme suspicion. That's how releasing from jail works. The player who's in jail has to go by this chart right here, which says arrested player's turn. All he gets to do is he has to discard all of his restricted cards. Those red cards, he does not have to discard his plots, but he has to discard all of his red diamonds or triangles. He rolls a die to resist interrogation. So if he is at zealous, then he's on this row. If he's at committed, he's on this row, positive, skeptical, or timid. So on zealous, if he rolls a target or a 1, 2, or a 3, he resists the interrogation. If he rolls an eagle, he fails. And that goes all the way down to timid. He automatically fails, but if he rolls a target, he still is released from prison. If you fail to resist, so if you're over here and resolve an interrogation card, if you fail to resist, draw and resolve an interrogation card. So there are 6 cards here is all that's there. You take the top one, you look at it, and it gives you some options. And you read those options, and they're all bad. This one says, if the descent track has exactly 2 dice on it, clear all the dice from the descent track. So you wipe out what has been saved. If there are at least 3 item tiles on the board, remove 3 item tiles from the board from the game. So you end up removing things that would help you with your plot. Choose a conspirator with at least 1 plot card. They must discard the plot card. So the way this works is you look at that. If you failed to resist, you choose one of them and you do it. You do not show any players. You don't talk to anybody else about what your choices are. And then you shuffle that back into the deck. If you resisted the interrogation, you stay in jail, but you do not draw the interrogation card. After doing this, if you rolled a target, you are released, so you're going to come out into the headquarters. Then you draw and resolve an event card, which is over here. So coming out of prison gets you closer to the end of the game because the game progresses as you go through these cards. Okay, plot cards. Here's how plot cards work, and it gives you a summary right over here. There are always required elements. So this one says Hitler is in any Berlin space, so any space in Berlin. And then you always have to be in the same space as Hitler. And you have to play, and you have to be at committed or zealous. It'll tell you here if you have to be at zealous. And then there's optional elements. And this just gives you a single die. This part here. And then anything over here gives you an additional die. It says optional elements. If you're a civilian, which Eric Court is a civilian here, so he would get an extra die if he did this plot. If he had poison as an item, he would get an extra die. And this has an asterisk by it, which means he can actually have more than one poison and get an extra die for every poison. That is not the norm. Normally you can only do one of each of these optional elements. And it says if you have intel as an item, that gives you an extra die. So you choose the plot card in your hand, you collect the number of die granted like I just explained, you add any dice granted by conspirator cards, so you may have other cards that give you extra die, and then you roll that die, and you don't have to roll all the die that you can. To succeed, you must roll targets, more targets equal to or higher than Hitler's support. So in this case, you'd have to roll 4 targets. Regardless of the number of targets, if you roll eagles equal to or greater than that shown on your suspicion track, then the plot fails. So at extreme suspicion, if you roll a single eagle, you fail. At high, if you roll a single eagle, you fail. At medium, it moves to 2. At low, it moves to 3. Failed plots, you discard the used items, any items that you used, and any action cards, but you do not discard the plot card. So you still get to keep the plot, even if it failed. If detected plots, you discard items and cards used in the plot. And this happens if you rolled eagles that are on your suspicion track here, the plot fails and it's detected. So if the plot is detected, you discard all your items that you used and the cards used in the plot. You discard the plot card also. You move the Hitler to chancellery. All conspirators lose 1 motivation, so they move down on their track. The conspirator that attempted the plot is then arrested at that point. So your goal then is to assassinate Hitler, and you have to do that with a plot card. You can otherwise lose by getting the document located card that is in here. Everybody gets arrested, game over, you lose, but of course that card may not be in that deck because you've removed 2 cards. If everybody is ever arrested at the same time, game over, you lose. And if you can't draw a card, then you lose. There are rules in the rule book for adjusting the difficulty, making it harder if it's too easy for you. There is the term nearest, and that means that anybody who's near to whoever it is talking about, the nearest to Hitler, that does not count somebody in the space with Hitler, but if there's 2 people or more equidistant from Hitler, then the players choose who would meet that criteria. There are key events, and key events are events that have a yellow across the bottom down here. Each turn, what happens is draw and resolve an event card. When that happens, you're flipping that card up and it goes there. And then whatever is on that card happens. Usually it moves Hitler and his deputies around the board a lot of times. There's other things it does also. And so you're just flipping up at the end of each turn there. But there's also key events, and key events with the yellow bottom here. Once the next card gets drawn, this card gets put over to the side where it says key events. And then what happens is it's no longer in effect. You don't do what's on the card, but any cards that have a yellow across the top, once there's a key event out, these cards just get discarded, so it runs you through the deck faster. And it gives you a little explanation up there. Ignore and discard, then redraw. And so these key events, they stay out. It says before the next event step, move this key event to the side of the board. Remove it when the next stage begins. So when you start the next stage, you're going to discard that and it's no longer in play. There are also what's called Gestapo raid cards. They start in stage 2 and go on. And it shows you here how many Gestapo raid cards are in the deck, maximum. And what happens is conspirators with extreme suspicion are arrested. So anybody over here, immediately arrested when this card shows up. So you do not want to stay on extreme suspicion for very long. Conspirators who were not arrested may discard any number of cards. Anybody not arrested, you get to discard. Raise each conspirator's suspicion by 1 for each restricted card they hold. So if they hold some restricted cards, including plot cards, they go up 1 for each of those cards they have in their hand. And then they return all dice from the descent track, get taken back into the supply. So that's a Gestapo raid card. So that's how you play Black Orchestra. You know, let me know in the comments down below if you played this game, and do you think it's too easy or too hard? Or is it just right? Is it easy to win? Is it hard to win? So make sure you tune into all of our videos here at the Board Game Network. Check down below in our comments for all of the contact information, the Facebook, the Twitter feed, our YouTube channel, all of that stuff. Make sure you tune in so you can keep up to date and find out what games you want to buy for Christmas. Of course, you're probably watching this after Christmas then, maybe, I don't know.